Is it?
Yep.
Thank you.
So just to follow up where we left off is and the importance of organising the building inspector to come to the site. It's the same thing when you're organising your building consent plans to go through. There is a requirement in the Building Act, and the requirement in the Building Act is 20 working days. That 20 working days for processing your building consent. I do a lot of voluntary work up at a scout den in Albany, and we put an application in for a very small extension to the side of the building, which is a laundry attached to the main scout hall. And so far that's been in since before Christmas. We are still trying to get information into the council, but the council officer has not understood that the application is for a very minor point of work, and he's looked at it as if it was a full commercial building. Unfortunately, there's a few problems between us and them, and I'm trying to convince them that it is a very small portion of work and we don't need to be assisting for. So he's looking for a geotech report, a structural report. He's looking for a facade engineer, mechanical engineer, all the things that you would normally do to a very large building, he's applied to a very, very small building. That becomes a bit of a problem, and it's an understandable problem. That's a lack of training on their part. So you will get some building inspectors who are very, very good. You'll get some building inspectors who go strictly by the book. It's a difficulty that we have. There's no easy way around it. But the 20 working days is there, and he's got every legal right to hold up the building consent for 20 working days. We then provided him with some more information, and he's still asking for a geotech report on a flat piece of ground, which is a little bit of a nonsense. So, like you, I have big problems trying to get my little building consent through the system. Unfortunately, the law is the law, and I can't step outside that. So they can just carry on asking for further information, So 4 months down the track, my building consent is still sitting in council. The key is identifying the correct people in the council office who lead in the project, and identifying the lead people within the architect, the owner, the lead builder, whoever that may be. One of the most important things to deal with is the special conditions. When a building consent is issued, there is a list of special conditions that are issued with the building consent. It might be they want producer statements. It might be that they've identified certain things on the plans that weren't good enough or need to comply. These conditions, this was an example of one that I did many years ago, and you can see that we actually had 50 conditions on that building consent. Unfortunately, what happened with us is nobody read them. Nobody on site actually read all 50 conditions and said, how does that relate to our job? We got to the end of the job to look for getting code compliance, and one of the things that we had on there was a particular level for the floor level to be up above a floodplain or up above the road. Nobody read that because the architect and the council officer didn't talk to each other. They just put it as a condition on the consent, and that was almost unachievable. Now, we already had the building built. How the heck do you change that? I don't know. There's a very common one there about the drain layer providing as-built drainage plans. You'll need to do that even for a very simple house. So at the final inspection down here, one of the things that you will need to put on there is the drain layer doing an as-built drainage. That's the only way the council can get that information, is you need to tell your drain layer because you're the guys that are running the site, you're the guys in charge. When the drain layer comes in, he decides to put the drain in a certain position to get the best fall and to suit the owner and everybody else. He won't necessarily follow the plans because it's sometimes quite difficult to coordinate that on the plan. So the drain layer will put the drain in that suits everybody because he knows he's got to keep his connections away from the house and away from the deck or whatever's been built. So therefore, that as-built plan becomes very important. It's usually the drain layer does it on a graph paper and hands it in. If the architect's any good, he'll actually reproduce that plan very accurately. That's handed to the council. It's kept with the records forever. 10 years from now, somebody might have a blocked drain. They go to the council, can we have a copy of our as-built plans, please? That's the reason that the as-built plan needs to go in. Because 10 years from now, trees have grown over it, blocked the drain, whatever. Someone needs to find that actual drain measurements from the boundary, distance from the house, measurements from the road, whether it's a Y junction, whether it's a full manhole, or whether it's an inspection bend. Doesn't matter what it is, it needs to be marked on an as-built plan because the drain layer will do what he thinks is best to suit everything going on. So that's quite an important one there. This one here on the big commercial job is the one that really caught us out. That one there you will only find on commercial buildings obtaining the fire protection systems. That's sprinklers, alarms. This building doesn't have that. Yeah. I'm supposed to be able to go to the wall and turn the switch on. You're supposed to have a type 2 system in here. So all commercial buildings are supposed to have that. There's a statement on big commercial buildings, there's a statement of fitness and all of the warranted fitness items identified on a plan, and they're identified in a schedule. That schedule is a statement of fitness for the first year and thereby becomes a building warrant of fitness, and thereafter, if it's a sprinkler system, it's checked I think it's every 3 months. If it's a fire alarm system, the same again. Lifts are checked regularly. Mechanical extract fans for smoke extraction are checked regularly. All of these systems that need regular maintenance, they're put on a schedule. And every year, the building owner gets in the experts to check all of the systems. They have to keep the records, and then those records are handed to council, and council issues a building warrant of fitness. So you should be able to go to any commercial building, and on the wall somewhere there should be a building warrant of fitness. If you don't see a building warrant of fitness, or if it's out of date, get out of the building and don't go in there, because something's wrong with that building. All right, so that's commercial industrial building. This is the one that really caught us out quite badly out at Henderson. We're working on a very big building, and the CCT video was for the public drainage. Very large public drainage. You could almost walk down the public, it was very big drainage. We had to do a CCTV. Now, nobody had read this. Nobody had thought about it, and it cost many thousands of dollars to get that CCTV done. Then we had to dig a drain up that was that actually had sagged and it was broken. So then we had to get it fixed. We had to dig up the public road to do that. Once we had it fixed, all the time we have not got a code compliance certificate because we can't hand in all of that. So first of all, we had to go and get a contractor who could do it. Then we had to get some pricing in. Then we had to get the contractor to start. And he couldn't start for 2 months. Then once the work was done, it had to have a CCT done again to prove it worked. Then we had to get in. All the time we still haven't got paid. And we're paying a lot of staff. We haven't got our code compliance certificate. That's where it impacts. And even with a little house like this we're doing here, if you've got a public drain on the property and you are building close to it, you might be required to have a full inspection done before you start and when you've finished, so that they know there's no damage done to that public drain. Because at the end of the day, that public drain has been fed by lots of other houses in the neighbourhood. So be careful of that one. It's the one that catches a lot of people out. What should have happened was the architect should not have picked up the building consent until he'd sat down with the council and talked through all 50 conditions. I've only got a few of them up there that were particularly nasty ones. And And then once the architect understood it, he should have got hold of the contractors and sat them down and said, these are the problems that we're going to be faced with. It's all about talking about it and keeping everybody in the loop. Don't hide behind, and I know it's very common now to hide behind an email. Me personally, I'd rather you came up and talked to my face. Then I know what's going on. And I can then help you get things over the line. So documentation for code compliance certificate. That's just an application, one that I've used in the past. That's a much newer one now. That's an older version. So it looks like that now. It looks quite different to that. That's an older one. It looks like that now. You can get these online. Go onto the council website and go onto their building website, and you can see all of the forms that you need to apply for a building consent, whether you need the application or whether you need a producer statement. They're all on the council website. You can print them if you want them. If you ever want help from these, let me know. Producer statements. You may get asked from time to time for a producer statement, even for a house. And that producer statement might be for somewhere in here you've got a beam, a steel beam that's got to go in supporting the roof or supporting a large opening, and therefore the beam is taking the vertical load further up. The council may ask for a producer statement from the engineer who did the design work. So the design is outside the standard building code. It's greater than 4 metres, or nowadays they do have the lintels for the garages. You can get specific design done that you can just get hold of the documentation. You don't have to go and get them designed by an engineer all the time. In the old days, we had to always get it done by an engineer because it was a double garage was wider than the permitted under the standards. So then you're asked for a producer statement. These producer statements, basically, that's the engineer. He will sign that producer statement. He will then say, yes, it's been built. He will come and do an inspection. Don't put the beam up and cover it up and hide it and then get the engineer out. If he can't see it and he can't see the connections onto the studs at either end and what's supporting that, he's not going to sign it off for you. So it's important to make sure if there's a condition on your building consent that says provide producer statements, then make sure you get that guy involved early. All right, so and follow the plans. I've had so many people where a specific design was done for a steel beam, and I went to have a look at the house, and the builder said, "Nah, mate, she'll be right. I just put up 3 12x3." And I said, "You what?" I said, "So you haven't got a steel beam in there?" He said, "No, no, she'll be right. I can tell you she'll be right." Well, how do I know? Why should I accept she'll be right? She'll be right doesn't cut it anymore. So producer statements are important documents. Unfortunately, in the Building Act itself, The Building Act does not mention the word producer statements. The old Building Act from 1991 to 2004, that did have producer statements in it. The new Building Act from 2004 does not mention the word. So there are some lawyers who will say, well, actually, they're not legal documents. The council's view is that if you don't provide them, why should they sign the building off? Why should they accept the design? So a producer statement is important for, usually if you're doing the average small house and it's a simple beam, the producer statement is it's known as a PS1. Actually, I need another piece of paper. Can I just fold that up?
Piece of paper.
Yeah. Can we alter this now? Do I have to rub it out?
Yeah.
Actually, what we should do is take a photo of that.
Yeah.
Have you got a camera?
Guys.
Then I can, right? Do we want to take a photo? Yeah, just take a photo of that. And I might refer back to that. Hey? Yeah.
Okay, like that.
Yeah. Oh, I'll just leave the top bit. Yeah, take that off. Yep. Actually, and I've got a copy here.
Put on to the screen.
Do you want to get some copies of that and we can hand them out? Okay, producer statements. Some people say they're not a legal document, but the council use them all the time. Producer statements are always done by professional design engineers. They're not, you can't do them, I can't do them, and that's the design. You need to know the calculations, you've got to be able to do the calculations and prove that they work. Design review is what we use for large commercial jobs. The job that Jenny and I worked on with out at the Albany prison had a lot of design review. Council rely on design review because they are reviewed by a third party, not something that's very common in dwellings. Construction is used a lot in dwellings. So you will use this one, so there is a distinct mark in here. These two are designed, they're always done as part of the building consent process. These ones are always done on site. So the site works, these ones are the important ones. PS3 construction, and there are numerous types of producer statements. Again, if you go into the council website, you will be able to see on the website one for the drain layer, one for the guy doing the exterior cladding, a producer statement for general construction work. And what you're doing on that construction is to certify that you have built it in accordance with the building code documents. Now, whether it's structure, or whether it's durability, or whether it's fire, or whether it's access, or whether it's heating and ventilating, there's a number of different clauses that you have to comply with. Construction review is only ever done by a structural engineer when you've got the structural engineer will come out and actually review the work and make sure that all of the work is done in accordance with his design. That's not very common in dwellings, very common in big commercial work. But in houses, we don't use that one. This is the one you'll use in houses a lot, which is the PS3, and you'll be asked to produce a PS3. So be careful on the conditions of the issue of the building consent, that's this one up here, that will identify which of these that you need to provide at the end. So if you're asked to provide one for the drain layer, make sure the drain layer knows before he even starts digging the ground, he's going to be providing a producer statement. Because if he doesn't know, he won't bother. Because what he's doing is putting his name on the line. He's certifying his work. Make sure that the person doing the weather tightness, the cladding on the outside, if it's a specific design to a particular type of cladding, whether it be plywood, whether it be weatherboards, whether it be linear, it doesn't matter what the product is, but if there's a requirement to provide a PS3 at the end of the construction, make sure the guy knows that when he turns up on site to start work. Get his paperwork going right at the beginning. Make sure he's aware. Don't hide the fact and then try and get it in at the end, because quite often you won't get it. If you don't get all these producer statements in, and that's in particular the PS3s, you won't be getting a code compliance certificate. Therefore, you probably won't be getting paid. That's where it comes down to. There's some examples I use on the big commercial stuff. One of the important ones that even for a house, you might be required for a surveyor certificate. If your house has been built very close to the boundary, they'll ask you for a surveyor certificate. The reason they ask for a surveyor certificate is, I'll give you an example of what happened to me as a building inspector. Out at Albany, I was asked to go and have a look at the foundations for a house, and it was in a farm area, and the guy said, oh, that fence is the boundary. And I said, are you sure about that? And he said, yep, pretty sure, mate. I said, I want a surveyor to certify that. What he didn't know was, I knew that further along the road, the surveyors had moved all the sections down a bit. Every single one of them. Then there was a gap in the middle of quite a large piece of land, and then this guy had used the fence. The fence was not the boundary. Now what happened was he had to get a surveyor in. He had the concrete truck waiting. When I appeared on site, the concrete truck was there. And I said, mate, I don't accept that being done. He said, oh, I couldn't care less. He said, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, mate. And I said, well, look, your ground conditions are okay, but you're too close to the boundary. I actually think your boundary is over there. That's where your house is starting, and you're supposed to be 3 metres away from the boundary. You're not. You're probably only a metre. Nah, she'll be right, mate. I know what I'm doing. So away he poured the foundations after I'd left. Sometime later, I was talking to a surveyor who happened to be working in that street, and I stopped and I talked to him, and I said, mate, by any chance you haven't done that section down there? And he said, yeah, I have. He said, those foundations are right on the boundary. Right on the boundary. So the whole big farm was being cut up, and they moved, so the fence that the man thought was his, and he lost 3 metres of land. His legal boundary was here. That's the old fence was along there. He lost all that 3 metres. He thought he had more land than what he really paid for. Right in front of him was the foundations for his house. So dig it all up, start again. So, big costs. Always, always, always check you can find the boundary pegs for the building that you're working on. Even if you're doing a very small addition to the side of a house, make sure you can find the boundary peg. That's the very first thing the building inspector will see. Show me the boundary pegs. Put a string line up the boundary to show me where the pegs are. Producer statements, again, we've been covering producer statements. These are systems in a big commercial building. The ones that probably you will need is waterproofing for a residential house if you've got a flat roof system. And waterproofing is important. Glazing, wall claddings, drainage as built you will need. Most of those are precast concrete. You'll be asked for a producer statement for the precast. Ask Jenny, she does a lot of work with structural precast, all that sort of thing. You need producer statements. Very important little documents. There is a bit of an argument as to the legal requirements, but they are something that are needed all the time. No, it's not going to work. There it goes, there it goes, there it goes. Documentation, I've jumped ahead of myself somewhere. No, I don't know where. Oh.
Okay, I'll do that.
There's one missing.
Can you just close out?
Yeah, no, just go back to the program. Okay. I just want to go back to the program. Okay, program. So, again, when you're doing a program, and every job should have some kind of program, because you need to know what day you're going to get paid, what day you need to finish things, what time, when you're going to book the concrete inspection, when you're going to... All of these items are just from pre-lining to internal finishes to site works and landscaping. You can't get a code compliance certificate until you've done the site works and landscaping. The reason is the building inspector doesn't want to come back there in a month's time to find that you've piled the dirt up against the side of the house, and therefore at the cladding is therefore buried underneath the new garden. So therefore he will want to see all of the landscaping finished and the clearances at the bottom of the cladding to ground. He will want that finished. You won't get a code compliance certificate until that happens. If you're doing staged building consents, and it's a good idea to do staged building consents for bigger projects, not for small projects, but for a bigger project, if you're doing a large luxury house, you're wise to do a foundations consent, which is foundations and all of the drainage, up to floor slab, just up to the floor slab, because then you can get people working on site. You can get your digging done. You can get your concrete poured started whilst the architect is finishing the last details of the main consent and getting it into council. And there might be some arguments over weather tightness or details or particular details to a particular product. But at least you're on site and you're working and you're getting progress. So staged building consents, stage 1 and stage 2, very common in big commercial work. Not so common with dwellings, but it's a good idea. There's nothing to stop you doing it that way. The council don't like it because it splits it up a wee bit and makes it a little bit hard. There's a lot more extra paperwork. It means that you're paying 2 lots of fees. It means you're paying, because of these extra fees, the owner will say, no, I don't want to do that. I just want 1 building consent. That's fine, but remember, if he excludes the groundworks away from you and you're not doing the groundworks, then it's up to him to get the code compliance certificate. He can't move in and he can't sell it until such time as he's got code compliance certificate. So the code compliance certificate now controls a lot more things than ever before. In the old days when I was a building inspector, we didn't have that control and anybody could move into any house. There was no requirements not to. And it was very, very difficult to control. So one of the things to really, really make sure you're watching all the time is identifying who's the council officer. Who do I talk to? Ring up early. Get to know who he is. Get him on site. Ask him the pertinent questions. Be open and frank with him. Refer always to your special conditions of your building consent. So what we might do is just a little list of things that all of the project things that you need to identify, so that you've got a list of what's happening. I've got a little handout here if you want to get a hold of it. There is a little handout here and there is some conclusions at the end there. Actually, what we might do is hand this out, because there's some conclusions at the end. Have you got one there? I don't know if I've got enough. We might have to get some more printed. I might have to share 1 or 2 because I may not have enough. No, I need some more printed if you've got some more.
So you guys have
Yeah, might have to just share them around for a minute until we get some more printed. So I identified a whole lot of conclusions at the end there, which kind of summarises what I've been talking about and the fact that you do need to be involved with the council. Don't ignore them. There are a lot of exemptions that you can deal with. There's a whole document in the Building Act about exemptions and what you don't need a building consent for. In the exemptions, you've got a whole lot of things that you don't need to apply for building consent for. In that, be very, very careful of the one where you're changing the use of a building. This, for instance, was probably a commercial factory when it was built. And we've now got a change of use where we're actually using it for a classroom situation, and we've got offices up there. It's still very similar, but think about the number of occupants in here, and think about the fact that as a factory where there was storage and there was shelving and there was a whole lot of pipe work or whatever it was in here as a factory, probably only 2 or 3 people were working in here, and up to 10 maximum. Now, as a building where we're using it as a classroom, a whole lot of other things start to apply. First of all, disabled access. The accessibility in and out of the factory. That is known as a change of use. So therefore, you're required to have a building consent for the change of use. You might need more toilets. You might need, you need an accessible toilet. You might need lots of other things. It doesn't look like it's a change, but in actual fact, it's a change of use. So you can't take a big factory that was once used as a warehouse showroom where you might have got 20 people there. You've now got it all empty and you're now using it for a church. So you're changing the people use. And one of the first things I talked to you about was it's the People Act, and it's looking after the health, safety, welfare and occupancy of the people. So changing it to a people use is a vastly different thing. You therefore need a full building consent. And you won't get a building consent until you deal with all of the issues like means of escape from fire. All of the accessibility rules regarding people with disabilities and wheelchairs. Means of escape and the accessibility are the two key issues when you're changing the use of a building. But you also have to look at fire escape. So therefore, fire escape, and we need, for instance, we should really have an exit sign on that door. So in the event of a problem in here, I've got to be able to know how to get out of here in a big hurry. The reason the exit sign is there, actually, it's for the fireman, it's not for you and me. The fireman comes in that door when the building's got a lot of smoke and everything in it. He's got to know how to get out of a different means of escape. So, okay. Change of use is the one thing that you have to be particularly careful. Alterations to an existing building, you can alter an existing building, and there is lots of exemptions. Again, you can have a look at that document there is on the website, and you can get into that document there and you can look for what does not require a building consent. You can change the weatherboards on a house as long as you're only changing a few. You can't change the whole wall. You can do exempt building work. There are some things that you can do. You can build a little garage out the back of your section, but you don't need a building consent if it's less than 10 square metres. 10 square metres is quite a bit. And it does not have potable water, and you're not allowed to live in there. As soon as you live in there and it becomes a people use, you need a building consent. There is lots of examples in this book where you can get exemptions from building consents and the requirements from council. Again, if you've got a battle, book a bit of time with the council, go and sit down with them, have a talk to them about it. Have a proposal. One of the best things you can do is take a photograph of the area of what you want to build and where you want to build, and you can take that photograph with you, print it, take it with you, and you can talk to your building inspector. One of the big ones that I got caught out numerous times was retaining walls. People who build retaining walls and think they're exempt. They're only exempt if they're 1.5 metres high. Above that, you need to have building consent. And again, it's what it's supporting. If it's right on the boundary and it's holding up the neighbour's property, you've got a problem. It needs to be a whole lot stronger than what you think it's got to be. You're allowed to change your plumbing systems, and you're allowed to change the configuration of your bathroom around. You can put in gut the bathroom. If it's all back in almost exactly the same place, it's not going to be a problem. But if you're going to put a whole new bathroom downstairs, that's a different thing. That's a totally different thing. That's not a change at all. But if you're just replacing a basin that's old and tatty and out of date, and it's just a replacement, then there isn't a problem. So what I'm going to do is, I'll take that off there, and what we're going to do is write out some checklists. Maybe we'll have a bit of a break, a few minutes break, and then we'll do a checklist for whatever building that you guys are working on. So I've done a simple dwelling. What I might do is expand on that. Have a look at and think about your foundations consent and all the things that you need to do just for the simple foundations. And there's lots of things I can think of, whether it's the conditions, whether you're on soft ground, good ground, whether you're on, whether it's dry, whether it's wet, whether if you're doing reinforcing, what are the clearances from the reinforcing that you have to have your concrete, your membrane underneath, all of those sorts of issues. We can make up those checklists a whole lot bigger than just one word being foundations. There's a whole lot of things the building inspector is going to look at, check, and think about when he's looking at it. He's going to check and the first thing you always have to do when you're writing a checklist, have you got the plans on site? The approved building consent plans. Have you got them on site? That's the key thing that I'm going to be saying time and time again, can't say it often enough, show me the building consent. I'll walk on as a building consent officer and I'll have a look at, I'm not going to look at anything until you show me the plans. Can we have 5 minutes break? Let's have a break.